goodness. After all these years. Wow. Yes. Special something, doesn't it?
It does, yeah.
Only 12 fret neck.
Yeah. My son has a Taylor 300 series like that. That's 12 fret.
Short scale neck like that?
Yeah.
He'll play and play till we stop.
I'm just enjoying it. I know people are still coming in, so maybe a couple minutes. I think that might be it. Shabbat Shalom and welcome. I'm Rabbi Scott White, standing in for Rabbi Londi, my colleague and friend, and nice to see some familiar faces from my having been here previously, and nice to see some new faces as well. Look forward to seeing people afterward at the Kiddush. If we haven't met, I'll be glad to say hello, so just feel free to come up and introduce yourself. We've come to welcome the Sabbath on this very warm day, so I appreciate the fact that you've taken the effort to come out on the hottest day, at least temperature-wise, of the heat wave, which blessedly is about to draw to an end. So we'll turn our thoughts away from the physical and material into the spiritual to welcome the Sabbath, and we'll begin with a rendition of a song of welcome for the Sabbath on page 2 in your prayer books, Lecha Dodi.
Lecha Dodi, Likrat Kala, B'nei Shabbat, Nikabla, Lecha Dodi, Likrat Kala, B'nei Shabbat, Nikabla. Shabbat shalom umevorach. Shabbat shalom, Shabbat shalom, Shabbat shalom umevorach.
We use light to bring in the Sabbath. Symbolically, it represents the Torah, which is known in rabbinic lingo as oraita, from the word or, which is the Hebrew word for light. And it represents the Torah and the Sabbath coming together on this day where the Torah has instructed us that we have the privilege of rest and recovery and contemplation. I didn't ask anyone to volunteer. Do we have someone who'd like to come and light the candles and lead the congregation in blessing? Please. And if you'd like to follow along and join in with the blessing, it is on page 7. And join me from the top before we actually light. Come, let us welcome Shabbat. May its radiance warm our hearts as we kindle these tapers.
Light is the symbol of God's presence in our lives. The eternal one is our light and our salvation.
Light is the symbol of the holiness within each of us. The human spirit is the light of God.
Light is the symbol of the Torah's teachings, where the commandment is the lamp and the Torah is the light.
Light is the symbol of Israel's mission, as it is written, I have made you a covenant people to serve as a light to the nations.
Therefore, in the spirit of our ancient tradition that hallows and unites Israel and all lands and all ages, we kindle the lights of Shabbat.
Okay, we're ready. As we say the blessing, go ahead and light the candles, and we'll recite the blessing.
Somebody might have to help me do this.
Let's see. You have to pull this down. Well, it goes up.
Oh,
Like that.
okay, all right.
Push it up and then click. Now click with the trigger. Push it up. There you go.
Oh, okay,
Perfect.
whoa, okay. Yeah, it is.
We recite together in the Hebrew, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav tzivanu l'hadlik ner shel Shabbat. Amen. Thank you. Our service will continue on 78. If you are able to rise, please do so for the Baruch Hu.
Lai 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 Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMivorach Baruch Adonai HaMivorach HaMivorach Le'olam Va'ed HaMivorach HaMivorach Le'olam Va'ed.
You may be seated. I'll be continuing on the top of 79. You are our God, the source from which life and all its blessings flow. Wherever we turn our eyes, we behold signs of your goodness and grace. The fullness of your power is disclosed to us in your guidance of our people, in your constant shaping of human destiny, and in the wondrous works of creation. Your guiding spirit is present in all your works. The harmony and grandeur of nature speak to us of you, of your infinite might and majesty. And now if you turn to page 80, we'll continue in unison at the top. Infinite as is your power, infinite is your love. It may be seen through the history of our people Israel. The precepts through statutes and ordinances, the ways of righteousness, and brought us to the light. Therefore, in our lying down and our rising up, we will meditate on the Torah's teachings, finding within it the inspiration and guidance. On that self-same page at the bottom, in the middle and at the bottom, we have Ahavat Olam, which will be sung by Nathan and Becky, and will lead us directly into the Shema on the facing page. And if it's your custom to rise when we get to page 81, we'll invite you to do that. If you want to stay seated, that's also just fine.
Ahavat Olam עמך אהבת. תורה ומצוות, חוקים ומשפטים, אותנו לימדת. על כן אדוני אלוהינו בשוכבנו ובקומנו נשיח בחוגיך, ונשמח בדברי תורתך ובמצוותיך לעולם ועד, כי הם חיינו ואורך ימינו, ובהם נגי יומם ולילה, נגי יומם ולילה. ואהבתך אל תסיר ממנו לעולמים. ברוך אתה אדוני אוהב עמו ישראל, אוהב עמו ישראל. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kivod, Shem Kivod Malchuto, Leolam, Leolam Va'ed. You shall love the eternal God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. And these words which I command you this day shall be upon your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall speak of them when you leave your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise up. You shall bind them for a sign upon your hand, and they shall be a symbol before your eyes. You shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates, that you may remember and do all of my commandments, and be holy, holy to your God.
Lovely. Please turn to page 84 as we continue with responsive prayer from the top of the page, leading us into Micha Mocha as we approach the middle of the page with the music. Trust in the Eternal One with all your heart, and do not rely only on your own limited understanding. Time and again, God has redeemed us from the hand of oppressors and revived our spirits when our own strength failed us. We rejoice in God's guiding power. We praise and give thanks to the Eternal One.
Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 tehilot osefele malchutecha ra'uvanecha bokeyam lifnei Moshe malchutecha ra'uvanecha bokeyam lifnei Moshe
Keep the music rolling on 85, which is the facing page at the bottom section for Yismechu, that we shall be happy in God's Sabbath and cause us to delight as we hallow the day, celebrating God's goodness.
Yismechu v'malchutcha shomer Shabbat Yismechu v'malchutcha shomer Shabbat V'korei oneg Yismechu v'malchutcha shomer Shabbat Mikadeshe Shivi Yismechu v'malchutcha shomer Shabbat Yismechu v'malchutcha shomer Shabbat V'hashvi ratzita bo v'kidashto chemdat yamim oto karata Yismechu v'malchutcha shomer Shabbat Yismechu v'malchutcha shomer Shabbat Yismechu v'malchutcha shomer Shabbat.
We will now continue on 86 at the very top, and I invite you to join with me. Grant, O God, that we may lie down in peace and rise up again to life. Spread over us the shelter of your peace. Guide us with wise counsel. Be a shield about us, fortifying us against hatred and war, against pestilence and sorrow. Curb within us the inclination to do evil, and comfort us within the embrace of your love. Guide our going and coming into life and peace from this time forth and forever. We praise you, God, for your shelter.
Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom V'hamidenu malkeinu l'chaim. Spread the shelter of your peace over us. Guide us in wisdom, compassion, and trust. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom V'hamidenu malkeinu l'chaim. Save us for the sake of your name. Shield us from hatred, sorrow, and pain. Hashkivenu Adonai
As we prepare for the Amida, we turn to 87. This will be our opportunity to both say prayers together and have some silent time as well. The central prayer collection of the Friday night service, and we now ask all those who are able to please be seated, to please rise.
Adonai sifatai tiftach ufi yagid tehillatcha. Eternal God, open my lips and my mouth may declare your glory. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei avotenu v'imotenu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Leah, Elohei Rachel, Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chazanim Tovim, V'gonei Hakol, V'zocher Chaste Avot v'Imahot, U'mevii Geula Libnei Bneihem, L'ma'an Shemo b'Ahava, Melech Ozer u'Moshiach u'Magen. Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Abraham, ve'ezrat Sarah.
Congregation may now be seated as we continue on the top of page 88 together. Infinite is your power, O God. Great is your gift of life. In loving kindness, you sustain the world. Through the endless flow of your blessings, you preserve all of creation. You uphold the falling and heal the sick, free the captive, people in death as in life. Who is like you, author of life and death? We praise you, God, the source of eternal life. We'll continue now on page 89 responsively. For the expanding grandeur of creation, worlds known and unknown, galaxies beyond galaxies, filling us with awe and wonder. For the joy of human life, its wonders and surprises, its hopes and achievements. For high aspirations and noble causes, for faith without fanaticism, for understanding of views not shared. For human liberties and sacred rights, for opportunities to change and grow, to affirm and choose. May we then be just and great-hearted in our dealings with one another, sharing the fruits of our common labor, acknowledging that we are but stewards of whatever we possess. Help us to be among those who give generously of themselves, that others may not hunger, who dare to be bearers of light in the dark loneliness of stricken lives, who struggle and even bleed for the triumph of justice for all people. So shall we be partners in the repair of our world, for that has been our vision and our goal throughout the ages. We'll continue on 92 at the top we gratefully acknowledge that the eternal God is our creator and preserver, the rock of our life, the shield of our help. We thank God and sing praises for the gift of life itself, for our souls, God's keeping, for the signs of our Creator's presence that we encounter every day, and for God's wondrous gifts at all times, morning, noon, and night. Truly our blessings are without end, and God's loving kindness never ceases. Therefore do we forever put our trust in the Eternal One. On the facing page in the Hebrew, we continue now with the musical setting to the Hebrew prayer of Shalom Rav.
Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Taisim Le'olam. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Taisim Le'olam. Ki ata hu melech adon lechol hashalom. Ki ata hu melech adon lechol hashalom. V'tov be'enecha levarech et amcha Yisrael בכל עת ובכל שעה בשלומך. ברוך אתה אדוני עושה השלום.
We turn our thoughts now to those in need of healing, physically, spiritually, emotionally, as the Misha Berach prayer will be offered on page 10. And we want to recite any names of individuals that may be so in need. And I was given a list of some initials that I'm going to recite, and no doubt the Almighty will be able to identify these initials belonging to the appropriate party. C-O-H-W, E-V-C-S, M-A-H, C-H-A, and H-S. And does anyone have names of individuals who are in such need? Please offer them now. Mike Herman. Prayer invites God's presence to lift our spirits and allows blessing and hope to prevail in our lives. It cannot bring water to parched fields or mend a broken bridge or rebuild a ruined city, but it can water an arid soul and mend a broken heart and rebuild a weakened will. And so we pray for people who at this hour are in sickness, in want, or in distress of body or spirit, and name on our hearts those who are near us and in whose pain we feel. Help and feel your presence, realizing that they are not alone. Continuing with our music of healing.
Mishaberach avotenu mekor habracha la'imotenu. May the source of strength will bless the ones before us. Help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say Amen. Mishaberach imotenu mekor habracha la'avotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say Amen. ratzon im refi Yehu ratzon im refi Ve'hagion libi lefanecha Adonai tzuri ve'goli Oh, may the words of my mouth, the meditation of my heart be acceptable before you, eternal God, my rock and my redeemer. Oh, say shalom b'momam. Oh, yeah, I say shalom aleinu. Ve'al kol Yisrael. Ve'imru, ve'imru, amen.
Lovely, lovely. Thank you. Shabbat Shalom. We conservative Jews, I'm counting myself and my wife who is with me, have in common with you, Reform Jews, that we are liberal in religious philosophy. We're not fundamentalist. We're not orthodox. Despite the differences that may stand between Reform and conservative Jews in terms of observance and religious philosophy, we have in common that we're liberal, we're pluralistic. That's how I feel comfortable coming into another liberal synagogue, which is not conservative, the tradition that I was trained in and continue to profess, but I have respect for all the Jewish traditions because I'm a pluralist, and I hope you are too. But as I'm going to get to in my talk now, sometimes we have to draw the line when it comes to being pluralistic, when our brethren and sistren to the right of us, liberal Jews, begin proposing changes that cut against the grain of the moral development and ethical development of Western civilization. And again, I'll get to that. But I want to start out by talking about a selection from this week's Torah portion of Kiteitzei. Now, in the conservative tradition, we don't skip any of the Torah readings. I don't know what the custom is in this congregation, but in conservative and also obviously in Orthodox congregations, there are two systems for completing the entire reading of the Torah scroll. One is the annual, where there's no abbreviation in any of the weekly portions. There is also the triennial system, where over a period of 3 years, we read the first third the first year, the second third the second year, and so forth. And so in a 3-year time, if you go to the synagogue each and every Sabbath morning, you'll hear the entire Torah. Or if you're in a more traditional Orthodox congregation, you can hear that an entire year. And what that means is that we get to hear words in the Torah that, I'll just say it euphemistically, are clearly a product of their time, right? Because the Torah that is inscribed into the scrolls behind me is at least 3,000 years old, Moses being 3,300 and change years ago. And even the critical scholars who write about when the Torah may have been composed and the stories put together and redacted into one text will say that around 3,000 years ago, and things were really different. I mean, things were really different here in this country 30 years ago when you think about it, even 3 years ago in some ways. So in this week's Torah portion, we have a segment, at least one, the one I'm going to share with you. I'll let you judge for yourself because I'm going to read it. It's brief. So think about this. It is the segment known in the Torah in sort of, rabbinic lingo as the Ben Sorer Umoreh, right? You probably all know the word Ben in Hebrew means son. okay? So this is the recalcitrant son, and I'm just going to read it in the English. If a man has a wayward and defiant son, who does not heed his father or his mother, and does not obey them even after they discipline them, his father and mother shall take hold of him and bring him out to the elders of his town at the public place of his community. They shall say to the elders of his town, this son of ours is disloyal and defiant. He does not heed us. He is a glutton and a drunkard. Thereupon, the men of the town shall stone him to death. So you know about this, right? Make you a little uncomfortable? It's not the only instance. Of about a month or so ago, we heard the morning Torah reading at Beth Shalom, and one of my former congregants, I used to be the rabbi at Ohef Shalom, the once great synagogue, which is now consolidated into Beth Shalom, came up to me and said, wow, that was really disturbing what we read and heard this morning about how God commands the Israelites to smite the Midianites, right? Because the Midianites influenced the Israelites into apostasy. But not only does it say to smite them, it actually goes into detail and says, don't spare even the women and children. And she said to me, well, it makes me very uncomfortable. And I said to her, I'm in the same boat as you are, right? So the question becomes, what does it mean? How do we relate to something that is part of our Torah, that has been and remains and presumably will so? The rabbis of the Talmud asked themselves the same question with regard to this rebellious son, which paragraph that I read to you, and they go through in the Talmud an academic process of reasoning out qualifications for when this penalty for the recalcitrant son would apply. And the answer they come up with is never. Right? They create qualifications that are impossible to meet, and I'll just name one of them. There's a play on words in the Hebrew, right? When it says, le'ish ben, right? And that's saying when a man, le'ish, Ben, has a son, and the word play that the rabbis in the Talmud do is they understand it, they interpret it to mean that one of the qualifications for this punishment to be applied in terms of chronology and time frame is that a son would only qualify for it when he is becoming a man. Right? He's a son who is on the way to becoming a man, and they actually define in very concrete terms what that juncture is. Okay? It is 2 hairs on what is called the lower beard. Okay? That is probably an hour of one day. Okay? And there are other qualifications that would not meet the muster if that one did. So in the Hebrew, the formulation, and this occasionally will come along, it's an interesting Hebrew formulation if you know some Hebrew, ze lehalacha, right? This matter is strictly a matter of law, velo lema'aseh, but it should never, ever be enacted, right? So it's just a construct. So why is it there? And the rabbis of the Talmud deal with that as well. And there are 2 things. Number 1 is to clarify that even though the Torah scroll, the words of the Torah, prescribe in such circumstances stoning a young man to death, really what the Torah means to say is that it presents this whole scenario so that we can interpret it in such a way that it could never possibly happen, and it's actually giving the words of prescription to prescribe that it shouldn't be done. A little bit topsy-turvy? I know, hard to understand. The other is, and my parents would certainly concur with this, that sometimes sons can be really difficult, right? And if my children were ever like that, my own sons, and my father was around, he would say to me, Payback. Let's take a step back and look at the big picture. And that is to say that in instances like this, when we have something in the Torah scroll that makes us uncomfortable, it is usually the case that when we refer to the Talmudic treatment of this, the rabbis of the Talmud have gone through some kind of calisthenics, right, of reasoning to make it so that it doesn't really apply. And there's something else that we are supposed to learn out of it. The point being that when we examine Talmudic interpretation of episodes such as this, we can see that Jewish law historically has been very dynamic. It evolves, it changes with the time. As civilization develops morally and ethically, those parts of the Torah scroll behind us that no longer seem to fit are reinterpreted by the sages, so that when we read about something like this, or when we read about the commandment to smite the Midianites, we can go to the Talmud and see that there's really a lot more to it than what we read about in the Torah. And that's the process of how Jewish life and Jewish law has evolved over time. Now, in 1985, I'm very proud to say that the seminary that I attended, the Jewish Theological Seminary, which is the HUC of the conservative movement, if you will, and your Rabbi, Blondie, also was trained at that institution a few years before he's just a couple years older than senior to me. In 1985, which is the year before I was ordained, with a class of 18 men and 1 woman, there had been a woman ordained as a rabbi the year before. And since then, we have had women, just like in the Reform movement, becoming rabbis, just alongside men. It's about 50-50. Sometimes in any given year, there might even be more women in the ordaining class of the Jewish Theological Seminary. And so this is an instance of what had long been on the more traditional side of Judaism, right? Like I said at the beginning, we have in common that we're liberal Jews in terms of religious philosophy, but the conservative movement tends to be a little more traditional. You know, the conservative movement was really kind of a breakaway. When you look at the European history of the founding of Reform Judaism and it really coalescing in the 1850s, there was a convention when the more conservative group left, and that was the beginning of conservative Judaism. The conservative movement eschewed, stayed away from the ordination of women for a very long time. One of the reasons being that some of the senior members of the Talmud faculty at JTS were actually Orthodox rabbis and were respected throughout the world, and the conservative movement in JTS didn't want to lose, that boost that it got from having those rabbis who would have left, and some did, who were still alive when the decision was made in 1985 to begin ordaining women. I mention this because it's an example of the dynamism of Jewish law. What had for a long time, almost the first 100 years of conservative Judaism in the U.S., which started in 1888, women could not be ordained. It took 100 years for that to change, and it finally did. And some of the best conservative rabbis we have, indeed, are women. We've had female presidents of the Rabbinical Assembly. There are women becoming ordained as conservative rabbis in Israel. It goes without saying that the same is true of Reform since the early 70s, and I think there was a person from Kansas City who was one of the very first female Reform rabbis who was ordained. And so therefore, given the fact that authentic Judaism is dynamic, and that fossilized ideas and practices are considered upgraded, improved, and this represents the evolution of Judaism into a better religion, I think, then I think we can agree that it's very problematic that among the many problems that have erupted in Israel in the last 6 months since this government took office, including structural changes in the balances of power between the branches of government, this empowerment of the right wing, which includes the ultra-Orthodox and the national religious settler movement in the West Bank, in its drunkenness with power, to put it that way, has begun, if I can mix a metaphor, a crusade to reduce the status of women in Israeli society. If you may have heard about this, public buses now in some neighborhoods, you have passengers who come on who are ultra-Orthodox and who insist that women sit in the back of the bus. And here's what I don't understand. You know, I'm just going to take a little tangent here. There's a prayer in the Orthodox liturgy in the morning. Baruch atah Hashem, blessed be you, O Hashem, shelo asani isha, for not making me a woman. It's still there. If you go to BIV or KI, I go to KI on Tuesday mornings, that's the only prayer I don't say amen to that I hear. And thankfully, they never asked me to lead that part of the service. It would be a problem, because I wouldn't do it. But if you ask them, why is that still there? Here's the answer you get. The great thing about being a man is we get to do all these other mitzvot that women can't do. And why aren't women commanded to put on a tallis or tefillin? Because they're holier than men and they don't need it. Well, if that's the case, then why do they have to move to the back of the bus? We should put them up front. Concerts are becoming segregated. Swimming holes. You know, Israel has springs that people go to in addition to public pools. There are many public springs in Israel that are lovely. Hours are being proposed there where women would go at these hours and men would go at these hours. I will end with this. Obviously, it's problematic, but we should be very clear over and above that. This is not a matter of differences of opinion with regard to policy. This is turning back the pages of Jewish religious development in a way that takes us back to a time that ignores all of the evolutionary progress that has been made in Jewish life. And so therefore, I encourage you to remain informed, to participate in events. For example, a Zoom seminar that's going to be held in the first week of September. If you read an online newspaper called The Times of Israel, anyone can join this, and you hear from the luminaries of Israel. These are dedicated Jews. Some of them are devout Jews, but they are Jews and Israelis, Americans who have moved there, it's going to be in English, who share our values in preserving and enhancing the progress that has been made in Jewish living for the benefit of everyone. So I encourage you to do that, and I say to you Shabbat Shalom, and invite you to continue with the service with me. On page 368, as I open the ark and we stand for the adoration, page 368.
Let us adore the ever-living God. We offer praise unto you, who spread out the heavens and established the earth. Your glory is revealed in the heavens above, and your greatness is manifest throughout the world. You are our God, there is none else. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומורדים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש הקדוש ברוך הוא.
You may be seated, and we will continue reading together on 369 at the top. May the time not be distant, O God, when you shall be worshipped throughout the earth, when unbelief shall disappear and error be no more. Fervently we pray that the day may come when all people shall be guided by your teachings. Corruption and evil shall give way to purity and goodness. Superstition shall no longer enslave the mind, nor idolatry blind the eye. Then all who dwell on earth shall know that to you alone every knee shall bend and every voice give praise. May all created in your image recognize that we are brothers and sisters, so that one in spirit and one in harmony we may forever before you. Then shall your reign be established on earth, and the word of your ancient prophet be fulfilled. The eternal God will reign forever and ever. On that day the eternal shall be one, and God's name shall be one.
ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד. ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד.
Our thoughts turn to those who are no longer with us as we observe on this date of August 25, yortsites that have fallen on the calendar at this juncture, which include Estelle Abelson, Carolyn Rose Burlau, Miriam Cohen, Rosalind Davidson, Jacqueline Epston, Leonard Herman, June Horwitz, Ben Kamen, Richard King, Sidney Lefkowitz, Elaine Lewin, Charlene Mag, Lillian Margolin, Jean Parmet, Raymond Starr, Isidore Trachtman, and John Ullman. Are there any other yortsites that are being observed that would like to be recognized? Our thoughts now turn to those who have departed this earth, our loved ones, our friends and neighbors whom we've lost, and the 6 million who perished in the Shoah, and those of every race, nation, and faith whose lives have been a blessing to humanity. The departed whom we now remember have entered into the peace of life eternal. They still live on earth in the acts of goodness they performed and in the hearts of those who cherish their memory. May the beauty of their lives abide among us as a loving benediction. The mourner's Kaddish may be found on page 375, and we invite the congregation to rise and recite the Kaddish. Yid Gadal, V'yid Kadash, Shmei Rabbah, Be'alma Divrach Yirutei, Be'amlik Malkutei, B'chayei V'yomei B'chayei Dechol Beit Yisrael, Ba'agala V'zman Kariv V'imru, Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbam Barach, Ne'olam L'Amel Mayam. Yibarach V'yishtabach, V'yipa'ar V'yitromam V'yitnaseh, V'yitadar V'yitalei, Lal, Shmei Dekut Shabrichu, Le'ela Min Kol Birchata V'shirata, Tush Bechata V'nehemata, Da'amiram Milma, Mimra Amen. Yehei Shlama Rabbah Min Shmaya, Hayim, Aleinu, V'al Kol Yisrael, V'imra Amen. Osei Shalom Mimrama, V'yaseh Shalom, Aleinu, V'al Kol Yisrael, V'imru. Amen. Please be seated. Just a few matters that I'd like to share with you. First of all, Operation Breakthrough continues for 2 more days, through August 27th. Show You Care with underwear and socks for Operation Breakthrough. New Reformed Temple is collecting new underwear and socks for students size 3, that's toddler size, up to 8, that's medium youth. This is a loving, safe, and nurturing environment for children in poverty. The vision of Operation Breakthrough has always been for all children to have the opportunity to achieve their full potential. There's a container outside the front door until the 27th. Our community-wide Slichot program will be held on September 9th, Saturday. That's always a Saturday night, September 9th. That's the Saturday before Rosh Hashanah at Bnei Yehuda. And it begins with dessert reception at 8, Havdalah at 8:15, and at 9 o'clock, Rabbi Josh Fagelson, who's president and CEO of the Institute for Jewish Spirituality, will be holding a discussion on the breath of life, Jewish mindfulness, practice of tshuva. The Slichot service then will begin at 10:10 and be led by area clergy and musical soloists from congregations across the community. Our Sabbath flowers today have been given by the following individuals in memory of, I'll mention whom. In memory of Carolyn Rose Berlau by Charles Berlau, in memory of Richard King by D.D. King and family, in memory of Sidney Lefkowitz by Lisa Lefkowitz, in memory of Jean Parmet, I hope I pronounced that correctly, by Alan and Jean Parmet, in memory of Raymond Starr by the Starr family, and the wonderful Oneg Shabbat that we're going to be enjoying momentarily is sponsored by D.D. King in memory of Richard King. And so we now come to the conclusion of our service, which will be on page 437 as we join with Nathan and Becky in the singing of Od Yavo Shalom, bottom of 437.
Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu, Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu, Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu, V'al Kulam. Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu, Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu, Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu, V'al Kulam. Salam Aleinu V'al Kulam. Salam Shalom. Salam Aleinu V'al Kulam. Salam Shalom. Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu, Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu, Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu V'al Kulam. Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu, Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu, Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu V'al Kulam. Salam Aleinu V'al Kulam. Salam Shalom. Salam Aleinu V'al Kulam. Salam Shalom. Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu, Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu, Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu V'al Kulam. Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu, Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu, Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu V'al Kulam. Shabbat Shalom. Thank you. Shabbat Shalom. Oh, wonderful. Welcome, welcome. Yes. What's your name?
Karen Herman, so Jolie Herman is on the board.
Oh, okay.
And we are members of the, I can't think of all the temples members, but we're now
A lot.
members of this one too.
Yay!
Love this music, it's just.
Oh, well, thank you. We're so happy that you're here, and we're happy to be here. Thanks for lighting the candle.